Welcome to When the Facts Change. In this episode I'm doing something different, not talking about economics and politics in a fast-moving world or wrestling with various policy conundrums. Instead, this episode pays tribute to a personal and professional friend, not just from me, but from a host of leading figures from the UK's print media and some politicians too. On the 21st of May, I wrote a Substack post in memory of Patrick O'Flynn, who had died the day before from liver cancer. He was just 59. I first met Patrick in the mid-90s when he was political editor at the Daily Express and I was starting out in journalism, based at Westminster for the Financial Times. Patrick's talent and sharp intellect were immediately apparent. He had economic expertise, the subject of his Cambridge degree, but also serious political nous and an instinctive feel, depressingly rare among journalists these days, for public sentiment and the national mood. Patrick had strong opinions, but they were built on research and observation, rather than ideology or dogma. His views were heartfelt and firmly held, but they never prevented him from giving others a fair hearing or thinking he had nothing to learn. He had many journalistic comrades and played a pivotal role in Brexit, as you'll hear during this podcast. But just as he embraced his intellectual allies, Patrick sought out and respected those with whom he disagreed, which is why, when news broke of his tragic death, there was an outpouring of tributes, reflecting his many friendships across the political spectrum. Attending Patrick's funeral on Monday the 16th of June, the huge congregation gathered afterwards outside Mortlake Crematorium in West London and at a reception later that day. It struck me this was an exceptional gathering of journalists, some real characters from the days of Fleet Street, legends of the parliamentary lobby and the Westminster Press Gallery, where Patrick made his name. So, having asked his family, I moved among the funeral crowd, recording tributes on my mobile phone. Pretty soon there was a queue of people who wanted to contribute. So I've pulled these tributes together here, so his memory can be preserved, not just in the millions of words he published and the countless TV appearances, but also in the form of heartfelt messages from some of his friends. Patrick O'Flynn isn't particularly famous, but he was an exceptionally talented and extremely important journalist. And here's some messages that, as we say in journalism, stand up Patrick's story. They're raw, largely unedited, and recorded against the bustle and buzz of a room full of journalists chatting, drinking, debating and laughing. I suspect, as Patrick would have wanted.
Okay, so tell us who you are and your abiding memory of Patrick.
Nigel Farage. Well, he and I worked together incredibly closely. Firstly, to get Express newspapers to come out to leave the European Union, which he was the driver of, but I was there very much supporting him. And then, of course, in the European Parliament, I sort of persuaded him, come on, Patrick, you've got to make the jump. You've got to, give up your nice, cushy job and take a risk. So we worked together as colleagues. He was my top press advisor during some of the biggest moments of my life. Live TV debates against Nick Clegg, the Deputy Prime Minister, general elections, leaders' debates, and Patrick was there by my side throughout it all. Above all, I think the word integrity really shines through. Old-fashioned manners, values, trusting with a secret, but then when work was done, fun, laughs, jokes, and generally quite good bottles of red wine.
How important was he?
Oh, I think in historical terms, very. I think a national newspaper group coming out saying we should leave the EU doesn't sound much today. It was unthinkable.
And that was him.
So no. He plays a very, very big. When people look back at how Brexit came about, he was part of breaking the wall down and making it acceptable to say you could leave the EU. And it was because he had a great common sense. He knew where the country was. He wasn't part. Yes, he was in the lobby forever. He was never part of that Westminster set. Always his own man, and very brave.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I've known Patrick
since
college. My name is Peter Allen. I'm a freelance journalist based in Paris, still writing for the Fleet Street papers and broadcasting for LBC and the like. And I have grown up with Patrick, really. I think it's safe to say that. I've known him since he was a student. Wonderful man supremely intelligent, easily the brightest student I've ever met. I used to always try and sit next to him in all occasions to copy off him. He was much brighter than me, and he gave me lots of advice throughout my career. I saw him about a month before he died. We were in a pub together in Pimlico, the Constitution. Nothing had changed. We were talking about the good old days. Everything seemed fine, and we're going to meet later in the summer, and I'm absolutely devastated by what's happened.
I'm Nigel Morris. I used to work in the lobby for 30 years or so. Patrick,
The Mirror and the Independent?
the Mirror, the Independent and the Eye. But most importantly, early on, the Birmingham Post. And Patrick took over from me in 1993 as political editor of the Birmingham Post. And it was apparent from that moment that he was a supremely talented, able and versatile politician. But I will always remember him mostly for his great, mischievous sense of humour, his love of football. I can still see him on the terraces watching Cambridge United leading a chant which all the other Cambridge fans joined in on. I'll really miss him.
So I'm Paul Gilfeather, and when I was on the Sun and the Mirror, he was my lunch partner. So we were lobby lunch partners, and he was very much a mentor figure. I mean, I was just talking to Carol Ann there.
His wife,
and he kind of really took me under his wing, like a big brother. And I don't know if you remember this, Liam, but it was quite a fun place to work in the late 90s.
I totally remember it.
And there was once a list that was being put together of was it the Derek Draper 17 most powerful people in the UK? Do you remember that?
That's right.
And then
the late then Labour advisor.
Then a couple of others in the lobby decided to do the top 17 most fanciful female lobby correspondents.
Wouldn't happen these days.
And it was like, oh yeah, and everybody was doing it. I mean, even the old lobby, the White Commonwealth were doing it, Everyone was getting involved, and Patrick pulled me aside. I was 22, 23. He said, see those guys that are doing all that? He says, does it not feel a bit Benny Hill to you? I said, no, it's just a laugh. He said, I don't want to be that guy in there. It's good having fun and everything, but don't go down that. So this was from the outset, I thought, he's not okay, he's my lunch partner. I mean, I was number 4 on the Sun. He was already deputy political editor on the Express.
In the pecking order of reporters, yeah.
And I was like, can we be lunch partners? Because you're number 2, I'm number 4. And he was like, yeah, of course. And he steered me into. And then when I went to the Mirror as Whitehall editor, we continued as a journalist. He was, to me, people talk about the politics and the political mind and the economic mind, but see as a story getter, see as someone that understood the mechanics of what makes a good story, he was unrivaled for me, and he would, I would just say, he would load the bullets for me and I would fire them on the Mirror. I'd get away with a lot more stuff than he would, that he wouldn't even follow. Are you not doing that story? No, you do. We did the Joe Moore story together, of course, with the
Very Bad News,
yeah. Princess Margaret funeral stuff. Yeah. That was maybe our biggest kind of joint enterprise. Yeah. Thanks for asking. Beautiful day.
I'm John Craig. I'm chief political correspondent of Sky News. But I was a few years back. I was political editor of the Daily Express, and after that, the Sunday Express. And I think Patrick and I were both at the Express papers at the same time, roughly. When I was on the Daily, he was on the Sunday, as I recall, with Peter Oborne and Simon Walters. And then he moved over to the Daily. But, of course, as well as that career, he became press officer for UKIP. And then, of course, as Nigel Farage said at the funeral, an MEP. I think I'm right in saying from 2014 to 2019, I think. But I remember he left UKIP to join the SDP. Now, the SDP, of course, had
it's not David Owen's SDP. It's a sort of...
It is, but it's not David
Owen. The long-lost love child.
But the SDP had its heyday in the 80s, as you rightly say.
Yeah.
They were going to break the mould. A bit like Reform UK are proclaiming they're going to do now. But I remember the Peterborough by-election, which I think UKIP thought they had high hopes of winning. Patrick was the SDP candidate.
And he split the vote.
Yes, and denied UKIP a victory. And one of my colleagues, I remember chasing our producers, chasing Nigel into the gents.
Was he angry at Patrick?
If he was, he didn't say so at the time, but he probably was. But yeah, Patrick, as you say, he did his old friends from UKIP some damage there.
How good a journalist was he, John?
Oh, very good. He became a commentator and wrote very good comment pieces, but he was also a good story getter. I mean, he learned, you could argue, from the best. I mean, Simon Walters, who was one of the great tabloid political editors, and I worked with Patrick, with Simon as well, and learned a lot working with him. And Simon was described in the Alan Clark diaries as that cheapy chappy from the tabloids. But he was a tabloid genius, and Patrick learnt from him. And Patrick, of course, became a tabloid genius in his own right, but also a really good columnist. And I think it's probably his columns that will be remembered.
Yeah, I'm Kirsty Walker. Patrick was my first boss when I was a political correspondent at the Daily Express, so Patrick was my political editor, and I have some of my dearest, fondest memories of my times with Patrick in the lobby. As a young journalist, he could not have been more supportive, kind. He was a mentor to me. He helped me grow as a journalist, and I have so many wonderful memories of room 11, I think it was, on the Burma Road. Patrick sitting there.
That's the corridor in the Westminster Press Gallery,
yeah,
where the parliamentary authorities shoehorn us all into very small spaces.
Yeah, and I've got really vivid memories of Patrick, always in the corner. And the thing that's come out today, which is so true about Patrick, he was such a gent, but also as a journalist, what really was just so much part of his being was his devotion to his country, and also seeing the world from the perspective of the ordinary man and woman in the street. And he brought that to all his journalism. I remember doing a campaign with him when Gordon Brown put a penny on the basic state pension, and we ran a really successful campaign which got Gordon Brown changing his mind. And Patrick just was so committed to that campaign, and he obviously carried that on through the work that he carried on with Brexit, and of course his life as a politician as well. He was a dear, dear man, and I'm going to miss him, really. I'm going to miss him.
I'm Katie Eustice.
And how do you know Patrick?
I know Patrick because when I was at university writing my dissertation, I wrote to all the political editors. Patrick was one of the only people who replied to me, so I met him. We got on very well. Next thing I knew, he'd entered me for the Express traineeship, and that's how I got my first job.
So he became a bit of a mentor to you, Katie?
He was a mentor and part of the fabric of my life, because if I hadn't met Patrick, I wouldn't have got my job, I wouldn't have then met my husband, and so forth.
I'm George Eustice, and before becoming an MP, I was David Cameron's press secretary and head of the Conservative Party press office, so I knew Patrick very well in those years.
What made him the journalist, the thinker, the politician that he was?
I think he had a lot of integrity, and I think something came out in the service really strongly, was that he didn't believe in chumocracy or people who'd got there not having had to work for it, and that sort of belief in sort of meritocracy is something that I always came across. And I thought he was incredibly perceptive. He was a journalist who always managed to spot what was going on behind the scenes, even if you hadn't said anything. So as a press secretary...
Quite annoying.
Well, as a press secretary, when you were trying to not give away a delicate discussion that might be happening internally, he had a habit of being able to read your body language. Those eyes would be on you.
Seeing round corners, that's the phrase we use in journalism.
Exactly.
He could see round corners.
He could sort of deduce the conversation that might be happening, who might be blocking what, even though you hadn't said anything. And then, of course, sometimes he would run a speculative story, as we used to call it.
A kite fly. He'd fly a kite.
He would fly a kite, but it would often be right. And everyone would then assume that I'd leaked it in some way, so even though I hadn't. And I also remember him doing a scathing article about David Cameron once, even though I'd arranged for David to meet him. And but of course David Cameron, he had a natural aversion to him because he did have quite a privileged background, and Patrick didn't give any scores for that. And I remember David saying to me, I thought this guy was your friend, what's happened here? So I got the blame for that as well. So I got the blame for quite a few things on Patrick's account, but he was a wonderful guy, incredibly perceptive journalist, and just such a kind character as well.
Thank you. Right, I'm Ross Clark. Was a columnist on the Express, and I worked for Patrick many times. He was always came to me for I think the difficult stuff where they thought the readers could please the readers without upsetting the press regulators. I think that was the narrow line which we all had to tread.
You are a man of words, Ross Clark. Give me 3 words that are Patrick O'Flynn. Go on.
Oh, what do I... Well, courteous and determined, and he was just great fun.
That's 2, but you can have
words.
that.
Okay, fine.
I'm Virginia Urquhart Stewart. I knew Patrick as Virginia Blackburn because I wrote under my maiden name. We worked together on the Daily Express for many years. We became really good personal friends as well as colleagues. I saw him work through the Brexit years when he persuaded Peter Hill to get the paper to back Brexit, and I saw him when he became a UKIP MEP. I'm so terribly sorry about what's happened. I am going to miss him enormously. He was a wonderful friend.
So, tell us who you are, how you know Patrick.
I can't tell you who I am, I'd have to shoot you. My name's Justin Urquhart Stewart, currently unemployed, retired. Patrick was just a star partner of my wife, and they edited each other for years and years. But a few times I met him, it's such fun. Realising all those writing politics, you've got to make it entertaining. One of the few people who actually crosses the line from being technical into entertaining. Well done him.
I'm Peter Hill, and I used to be editor of the Daily Express, and before that of the Daily Star. And Patrick and I worked together for a long time, and we were very close because your political editor is one of the most important people on a newspaper. And one of the things, as I said at the funeral, was that we love to do campaigns, because what I liked as an editor was I liked more than anything to make mischief. I wanted to cause trouble. When I was a kid, my mother said that I would cause trouble in an empty house. And that's probably how I became an editor. So Patrick and I got on because Patrick was quite mischievous as well. He could seem to be quite straight-laced, but actually wasn't that at all. He was mischievous, he was naughty, and he like me wanted to cause trouble.
What were his qualities?
His qualities were complete and utter reliability, absolutely brilliant journalist, could make an exclusive out of nothing, and he was a very good advisor, because it's very easy for editors to get themselves into trouble, you see, because people will tell you what you want to hear, so you will carry on with something that you shouldn't do, because actually there's no one to stop you being stupid. Because when you're an editor, it's like being a dictator. Nobody can stop you. Literally nobody can stop you.
But he would tell you what he thought.
He would say, come on, this is the wrong thing to do. And I would listen to him because he was so reliable, and he was good-hearted as well. He wouldn't let you get yourself into trouble if he could possibly stop you.
Peter, thank you so much.
Nice guy.
Thank you so much. Okay, tell us who you are and your memories of Patrick.
I'm James Hardy. I was political editor of the Mirror when Patrick was political editor of the Express. Despite the fact we really didn't share much in common politically, we got on incredibly well. He was one of the world's nicest guys. He had very firm views, not ones I always shared, but he was always very happy to sort of hash it out over a couple of drinks in the press gallery bar in the House of Commons, and we just got on very well. I was so sorry to hear of what had happened. We'd lost touch in recent years as he'd moved into higher echelons of politics, that I'd moved elsewhere.
You surprised at the turnout here today, James?
Not remotely, no. It's he's the one thing that's come across through the service today and through the reception afterwards is just how many people loved him and how much he cut across all sorts of sort of political lines, party lines, social lines.
And it wasn't just his charm, was it?
No, it wasn't. He was a very, very intelligent guy, and he was blessed with a great sense of humour. But he was a very thoughtful guy as well. And I remember one of the things I had an argument with him about years and years ago was the salience of immigration as a political issue. And I dismissed it in those days. How right he's been proven. And that's sort of... He thought a lot more deeply about politics than I'm afraid I ever did, and analysed. What he was extremely good at. He understood totally the readers of the Daily Express, and he understood totally, in a way that you're insulated from in the Westminster lobby, what people in the wider country were thinking. He worked in Westminster, but he totally understood what was going on in the country in a way that lots of people who worked at Westminster did, including MPs. And that was a huge factor in his success. And you know, good luck to him. He was extremely good. And in fact, I really wish now, looking back, that I'd realised how good he was at the time.
I'm Julia Hartley Brewer, and I worked with Patrick when I was political editor of the Sunday Express and he was political editor of the Daily Express, and we were always simpatico on pretty much every political view. But the main thing is, it's not Brexit, it's not politics, any of that. It's just he's a really bloody nice bloke, and my last memory of him will always be, sadly, he came to my Christmas party, which was for awkward buggers. Just difficult, contrarian types, you know, like Patrick and me. And he was there with Carol Ann, just looking the picture of health and happiness. And that's how I'm going to always remember him.
Well, hi, sir. How are you, Liam? Tell us who you are and what Patrick meant to you.
My name's Bob Roberts. I'm the former political editor of the Daily Mirror and the former director of comms of the Labour Party. You know, the thing about Patrick to me, thoroughly decent guy, always polite, always reasonable, always willing to engage in a conversation. 25 years ago, Patrick and I were sort of trying to put the world to right over the NHS. I think he was slightly to the more left of me in those days, but we've changed round a bit over the years.
Talk about a reverse ferret.
Definitely a reverse ferret, or he could have just been arguing me for a laugh. But in the end, being a decent guy matters more than anything else, and Patrick was the most thoroughly decent guy you've ever hoped to meet.
How's he viewed across politics? He's obviously associated with being a Brexiteer, being an MEP for the Brexit Party, but there are plenty of people here today from the left of politics.
Well, I work quite closely with Sadiq Khan these days, and I was talking to Sadiq about Patrick just yesterday, and Sadiq said exactly the same thing. Always pleasant conversation, always polite, always courteous, very, very decent. It can be annoying sometimes in your political opponents, but Patrick was also very, very decent.
I'm Harry Cole, the political editor of The Sun, former political editor of The Sun, outgoing political editor of The Sun. I've known Patrick literally from the moment I arrived in Westminster. He was one of the first people I met. I was flicking through my phone the other day, looking at all the messages we sent, going back all the way to 2009. I spent a large time trying to ask him for a job at the Express, which he was unable to provide, but was very helpful. And then when he went over to spin for UKIP, we did a lot of very good business. But he's always been an absolute gent to me, a completely unnecessary father figure who went out of his way to help me with my career in any small way that he could, for absolutely no benefit of his own, because he was a legend.
Well, I'm David Wooding. I work in the lobby, working for The Sun and The Sun on Sunday, and the News of the World as political editor of two of those titles. Patrick was a great political mind. He was one of these guys who mentored young people coming through with great ideas on how to forward their career in journalism. And I was astounded by the amount of detail he always had on some of the stories. But it was great fun too.
But you're Liverpool, David, staunchly, and he's Cambridge United. How did that go down?
Well, as he was in politics, he was the same in football. He used to accept the good points of the team that you supported, and he would give you a great detailed analysis of your own team and how they played. at the weekend, even though he didn't support them. He'd know more about how well Liverpool played than I did. And the same on politics. You come up with an idea and he would either shoot you down in flames and give you all the facts and figures as to why you were wrong, or if he agreed with you, he'd give you even more evidence of why you were right. So he was absolutely bang on the money. But a great man, and as we heard in the funeral today, I've not thought of this, but he never once raised his voice or fired with anybody. Always an absolute gentleman.
Tell us who you are and how you knew Patrick.
Gawain Towler. Patrick was the first journalist to ever ask for my opinion when he was bringing the Express on side. So as the then head of press for UKIP, for the first time ever a journalist phoned me, and it was Patrick who did so, and that was just about a year before he'd got the paper to turn over and become a Brexit supporting paper. But we'd never had a journalist ever phone us up before.
You were carrying the coffin today
Yes.
with colleagues and family members. That must have meant a lot to you.
I was very moved. I felt, I will admit that I feel a little bit of imposter syndrome. He's a very good friend and all that, but I'm sure there were people better suited. But I was very moved when Caroline asked me, so I was honoured, very honoured.
Jonathan Isaby. I've worked in Westminster for 25 years in a whole number of different guises. And I suppose when I first started working for the BBC back in 1999, Patrick was obviously already in the lobby, and so, you know, our paths have crossed literally for a quarter of a century, and I can't believe he's gone. He was such a decent bloke, always passed the time of day with everybody around the Westminster village, but really importantly, understood life outside the Westminster village as well, and I think that came across incredibly well through his writing and everything he did. He really did, certainly as far as the Daily Express was concerned, when he was so important there. He understood what made Express readers tick. He understood what made the British people tick. And I was particularly privileged when I was editing the Brexit Central website to have him write on numerous occasions for me, sharing his insight with our readers. Indeed, I think the most prolific writers on the Brexit Central website were him and Austin Mitchell, the former Labour MP, also
the Grimsby MP,
exactly, also who we lost a few years ago. So I was pleased to be able to come to his funeral today and to acknowledge his contribution to journalism, to politics, and Westminster is a sadder place without him.
I'm Belinda de Lucy. I met Patrick 5 years ago, knowing full well who he was, and I was completely starstruck that he was going to be the father of our monthly MOG meetings for all those
That's the
years.
Marquis of Granby in
the Marquis
Westminster.
of Granby.
Very famous pub.
Very famous pub, and every first Tuesday of the month after Brexit went through, we decided to meet up with many of the crew from UKIP all the way up to the Brexit Party, and Patrick was the godfather.
A basket of deplorables.
But we were the deplorables of the deplorables, and we rejoiced in it over pints. Patrick was, and you know, for many will remain in our memory as one of the most gentlemanly political figures. He would always stand up if we walked into the pub, offered drinks. I'd always try and sit by his side because I was aware I was next to the sage, you know, this oracle, fountain of knowledge and wisdom. I was like a sponge, and I wanted to soak up his elixir of knowledge and experience. I felt so privileged.
You haven't even had a drink yet. What are you going to be like at the reception?
I was so aware I was sitting and spending time with a legend and someone who we all stood on the shoulders of to get Brexit through. It was fantastic, and he spoke more about his love for his family and his place by the sea and his wife and his children and his granddaughter, you know, even more than politics. And I was so touched. It was lovely for the young men and women around him to hear such a legend speak as such a devoted father and husband and grandpa. And I love him, and he'll be missed dearly. We're thinking of doing a plaque for him in the pub for where he sat, and asking if we can put a little plaque for, you know, Patrick was here.
We need to rename the pub.
We need to rename the pub, the legend. And in fact, our MOG WhatsApp group has been renamed the O'Flynn O'Clock in his honour. Sorely missed, and we loved him dearly.
Hi, I'm Suzanne Evans. I worked with Patrick O'Flynn in politics. It was a lovely service today. I wish I didn't have to be here because I can't believe he's gone. I keep thinking one day I'll wake up and pinch myself. But he was just everything people said about him today. The best journalist, the best politician, the most wonderful gentleman, great fun, a lovely, lovely man to be around, and I'm just so honoured to have had him in my life, and I just wish he'd been in my life longer.
I'm Alex Phillips, and Patrick and I, he was Director of Communications at UKIP while I was the Head of Media, and we spent many hours together during 2 years of campaigning, and then stayed really close friends long after that. And gosh, I just think back of all the things, that the games we used to play, the impressions he used to do. We used to have a stupid game we'd play where we'd make each other spell something. So some would say the letter T, and then that person had to go to the kitchen and get a round of teas in. And I remember him whistling a tune once, and I had no idea what it was. Apparently it was Booker T. It passed over my head. But we just laughed all the time. And then we loved that time together we spent so much. However stressful it was, however infuriating it was just joyful at the same time. And so Patrick and I wanted to keep the dream alive. We set up monthly Mog O'Clock, which is now renamed Patrick O'Flynn O'Clock.
The Marquis of Granby.
Marquis of Granby, where we would meet monthly, everyone who was part of the UKIP movement, and then the Brexit Party, then Reform UK, and the group just got bigger and bigger. And first Tuesday of every month, he was the one who was always there without fail. I missed far too many. I regret that now, because any moment spent with Patrick was just wonderful. And when I had a life crisis, if I wanted to cry on someone's shoulder about a boyfriend or work, it was Patrick I would go to. And we'd go meet in a oldie man pub somewhere and have a couple of pints together and put the world to rights. And he was so special to me, and he's so special to this planet, and we've really lost one of the best.
Thank you, Alex.
I'm Henry Bolton. I knew Patrick from Brussels when I was working there, and later as UKIP leader. And I found Patrick to be one of the most astute observers of people, one of the wisest advisors that anybody could have, and a good friend. He was somebody I could turn to whatever the problem was and rely entirely on his wisdom and his discretion. And there's not much else I can say about that.
You look very upset, Henry.
Well, when I think about it, I am. I'm very upset.
Too young, wasn't he?
Far too young. And the last time...
59.
Yeah, 59. And the last time I saw Paddy was in a pub in London. And he called me...
His natural habitat.
Yeah, and he called me and he said, Henry, I don't know why, but I just thought you might need a beer. Come and have a chat. And so I did. And how he knew that, I don't know, but he was spot on. No, sorely missed, and a wonderful man. He could see round corners, and he could see things that other people just couldn't see. And he had the patience of a saint. Yeah, good man.
Thank you.
William Clouston, I lead the SDP, Social Democratic Party.
How are you feeling today?
Very moved. I thought the service was just magnificent. I thought all the tributes were phenomenal, and I think you and I didn't hold it together, which is the right thing.
Because you spotted my tears.
No, I am, because honestly, he was a wonderful man, and for years I've relied on him, and he always gave me the best advice, gave me the best support. So,
what's his legacy, William?
Well,
he's not a household name. He's not a big shot politician.
But it's often like
But look
that.
at the people here.
Yeah, but without whom? I mean, seriously, Patrick's influence on the course of this country was probably Brexit. Would it have happened? It's a causal chain from the campaign. So, but he's very modest. He would, he probably did change the course of this country. But yeah, bless him. I miss him like hell.
Thanks a lot for listening to When the Facts Change. An unusual edition of this podcast, I grant you, but one I'm pleased to have made. Because Patrick O'Flynn was an exceptional man, a good friend, and an important figure in British journalism. I hope you found this podcast interesting, even if you didn't know Patrick personally, because his work was widely known and resonated with countless readers. I'm shattered that Patrick has died so young, and I send my deepest condolences to Carol Ann and his family. Patrick O'Flynn, the 29th of August 1965 to the 20th of May 2025. Rest in peace.